So this is 2012. 9/11 is now unbelievably over 10 years ago, but it was a moment that changed my life for sure, changed my life, changed my dining experience, changed a lot for a lot of people, and for me as well, kind of just completely has thrown me in a different direction. Because on 9/11, like was mentioned, there was a restaurant at the top of the World Trade Center called Windows on the World. There were about 300 workers working there, and on that morning, 73 were there and lost their lives. They either jumped from the 107th and 108th floors or were incinerated to death. They were all low-wage workers, mostly immigrants, because the owner of Windows on the World wanted somebody from every nation on earth in the restaurant to make sure that they could sell expensive bottles of wine to anybody who came from anybody all over the world. Right after the tragedy, the union that was inside that restaurant, which was a very tiny union because less than 0.01% of all restaurant workers nationwide are unionized, called me and called one of the lead servers, waiters from Windows on the World, and asked us if we could set up a relief center to initially help the workers who had lost their jobs post-tragedy. And we didn't know what we were getting into at the time. We just knew that help was needed. We kind of jumped into it. And very, very quickly after the tragedy, we were overwhelmed, literally flooded by workers coming in, first from all over the city, New York City, and then in recent years from all over the country seeking our help. And we didn't know why. We really couldn't tell at the time why we were being so overwhelmed with calls for help from restaurant workers, not just from Windows, not just those affected by 9/11, but really just all restaurant workers, until we did a little bit of research on the industry. So most people don't know, but the restaurant industry right now is neck and neck with retail as the largest private sector employer in the nation. It's over 10 million workers nationwide. It's one of the fastest growing sectors. It's one of the only sectors of the economy that actually grew during the economic crisis. In particular, fast food and liquor sales grew a lot during the economic crisis. I'm sure you can think about why, unfortunately. But people have continued to eat out even as times are tough, and as a result, the restaurant industry has been doing really, really well. Well, one part of the industry, right, the employers. Because as the industry continues to skyrocket and grow, the restaurant industry actually also happens to be the employer of 7 of the 10 lowest paying jobs in America. And the 2 absolute lowest paying jobs in America are restaurant jobs, actually below farm workers, below domestic workers, below all other workers. The Department of Labor reports that restaurant workers are actually the lowest paid workers in America, which is sad given that it's an industry that's actually one of the most profitable and one of the fastest growing. The National Restaurant Association reports this year predicts $630 billion in profits. And they also predict that by the end of 2012, 1 in 10 Americans will work in the restaurant industry. So huge industry growing, very, very low wage workers. Why? Why is it like this? Well, it's not an accident. It's because of the power of the National Restaurant Association, which we like to call the other NRA. The other NRA, which most people don't know about, but actually has been named the 10th most powerful lobbying group in Congress, 20 years ago, struck a deal with Herman Cain at its leadership, then the lobbyist for the NRA, struck a deal with the Democrats in Congress saying, we will not oppose the overall minimum wage continuing to rise as long as the minimum wage for tipped workers stays frozen forever at $2.13. And so it has been. So it has been frozen for the last 21 years at $2.13. Most people who work in the industry around the country, if they work in what we call the front of the house serving people, earn less than $3 an hour, which means that for the most part, they live on our tips, right? So incredible poverty, as you can imagine. Almost every restaurant in America, most people don't know this again, but almost every restaurant in America, including the finest dining restaurants, has one person, at least one person, if not more, that's homeless or teetering on the brink of homelessness. And without paid sick days, our studies show that 90% of restaurant workers don't have paid sick days. 2/3 of the people who cook, prepare, and serve your food are doing so while sick. And we've collected stories of workers with H1N1 serving your food, pink eye. I could go on and on, but it's not lunchtime yet. I'm sure you don't want to know. But it's gross, and it's disgusting, and it's the people that we interact with, and many of us have worked in the industry, so we know, but it's also something that every one of us interacts with almost daily. So here we are coming on the scene post 9/11, suddenly being flooded by workers from all over the country, realizing and learning why the incredible opposition, the scope of the challenges, the size of the industry. We realized pretty early that we couldn't do any one thing to really build power for workers and change things, so we created a tri-pronged approach. We started these, what we call workplace justice campaigns, using a combination of litigation, worker organizing, community organizing, to win policy changes in large, high-profile restaurant companies all over New York City first, and then all over the country. So over the last 10, 11 years, we've won about $5 million in stolen tips and wages. We've won big policy changes for thousands of workers, including paid sick days, health benefits, raises, promotions, job security, grievance procedures. We've won all of these things for thousands of workers in lots of big, high-profile restaurant companies. But while we're doing that, while we're going after exploitation in the restaurants that we say are taking what we call the low road, we're also promoting what we call the high road, working with employers that are doing the right thing, providing good wages and good working conditions, trying to lift them up and work with them, take them to Congress to say, you know what, I'm a restaurant owner, but I actually believe in an increase to the minimum wage because I see that it increases productivity and reduces turnover. So we've worked with about 100 high road employers. They range from Tom Colicchio, who you may have seen on Top Chef, who's actually a really good employer, all the way down to small mom and pop restaurants all around the country. We've worked with them to open our own worker-owned restaurants in New York and Detroit called Colors, soon to be in New Orleans. And to train thousands of low-wage workers of color to move up to those living wage jobs in the industry, which are held almost predominantly by white workers, which are server and bartender positions in fine dining restaurants. And we've grown into a national organization with about 10,000 members in about 19 cities nationwide. So we've grown really rapidly since 9/11. It's mainly due to the demand from workers and even now employers. We've been kind of responding as quickly as we can to people calling us from all over the country. I was just telling Attica that workers have called us from Kentucky saying, you know, we need help. Workers have called from all over saying we need a rock. We need a rock in our location. So we've grown really rapidly in response. And we've had to grow our resources, obviously, also to build the organization, but we're definitely not experts in grassroots fundraising. I appreciate being asked to come, but we're definitely not the star example of doing individual donor fundraising or grassroots fundraising. A lot of our funding does come from foundations. But there are a few things I could probably share from our experience that I think might be of interest. One is that we've been creative about how members can contribute. So those 10,000 members, we do charge dues, and we haven't been the greatest about collecting them, but we've been kind of creative about how to collect them and how to get them and how they can be obtained and used as a leadership development tool. So we've collected them at meetings. We've had our leaders in each of our cities, restaurant worker leaders have been the ones to lead the effort to collect dues. Members and leaders have organized events where they showcase their talents as restaurant workers and artists. A lot of restaurant workers are very, very creative people, so they'll showcase their talents in food or bartending or art or whatever it is that they do. And then there's one piece that's actually been really lucrative, which is that every time we launch a campaign against one of these high-profile restaurants, our leaders actually said, you know, here we are as an organization fighting for these workers, with these workers alongside them, going out, protesting in the snow and the rain and all kinds of weather, getting the employer to do the right thing and winning millions of dollars in back wages, workers should contribute some portion of that. And so the leaders actually instituted a rule at ROC that every time we do a campaign, workers have to contribute 10% of whatever they win to the organization. So we've had very large campaigns where we've won millions of dollars, as I said, in back wages, and some small campaigns, and sometimes the smaller campaigns end up being really lucrative for the organization. So, for example, a couple of years ago, we were engaged in 2 campaigns at the same time, one against one of the only 5-star restaurants in New York, Restaurant Danielle, owned by French chef Daniel Boulud, and one against the Fireman Hospitality Group, which owns all of the restaurants surrounding Carnegie Hall and Lincoln Center. Huge campaigns, thousands of workers involved, and in the middle of all of that, a group of workers, about 20 workers, immigrant workers, came to us and said, we work at a small cafe and we haven't been paid, can you help us? And we said, we're actually in the middle of these strategic campaigns, but we can help you self-organize, but here's the rule, if we help you self-organize, you've got to donate 10% of whatever you you win. So the workers, we taught them to self-organize, they did it on their own. They actually won an amazing settlement they won paid sick days and holidays and vacations. They won about $200,000, which is small relative to the other campaigns we've done in back wages. And they, as a group, actually more than the workers at these fancy five-star restaurants, decided we want to donate more than 10%. We want to donate 15% of what we win to the organization. So we ended up getting something like $25,000 out of that campaign because the workers donated from their winnings. But even more importantly, at the end of it, we didn't know this, but we found out that actually the cafe was the restaurant inside all of the Equinox gyms in New York. So it turned out that the policy changes that we won, paid sick days, vacation, all this stuff, affected thousands of workers in all the Equinox gyms in New York. And so, I mean, it was just an example where we didn't put much attention. We helped these workers self-organize, but an example in which organizing was very connected to our ability to bring in some resources for the organization to support the work we were doing in that campaign and, frankly, other campaigns. But I think, for me, the biggest lesson of the last 10 years has been being really creative and strategic about who our constituency actually is. Because, and that may sound weird, given that we're a restaurant worker organization, one might think, okay, your constituency is workers, but we've actually completely changed our thinking about that, and it's not just restaurant workers. Our constituency over the last 10 years has continually grown. Actually, in 2009, Rinku Sen, who's the director of the Applied Research Center, and my co-director, Fekak Mamdou, wrote a book about our work called The Accidental American. And the theme of the book is that actually ROC's work and vision has expanded. It started with immigrant workers after 9/11. It expanded to all workers, white, black, US-born workers from all over the country. It then expanded to include employers, actually, employers who've been partnering with us to do the right thing and take the high road. And then the ultimate frontier is consumers. And who are consumers of restaurants? It's almost, there are some people who don't eat out, but almost every single person in America and people from other parts of the world who are touched by this industry. And that expanding vision has expanded our ability to raise resources, definitely, but most importantly, it's expanded our ability to win. Right? And that has to be, for us, the most important thing. The resources are incredibly important, and I don't want to at all downplay them, but in my mind, it's about we have to win. $2.13 is not enough for anybody in the world. $2.13 to live in America is the reason why we've got people living under a bridge and working at Chef Emerald's restaurant in New Orleans, right? $2.13 is the reason that people are going to work while sick, because while they don't have paid sick days, they definitely can't afford to take a day off from work. So it's not enough, it's not okay, and it's not okay just to organize and to, we have to win. We have to change that law. It's ridiculous, it's got to change. That's it. But we realized a couple of years ago that was never going to change. It would never happen if we didn't reach the widest possible audience. And I don't actually just mean the 10 million restaurant workers in America. That's a lot of people. We actually had to reach every single person who eats out. Every single person who eats out needs to know what's happening behind the kitchen door. So we were coming to this realization, also coming to the realization that we weren't getting very far in Congress because of the opposition, the power of the National Restaurant Association, without some groundswell. And around the time that we were coming to this realization, something happened, which was that a couple of people wrote a couple of books. One was Michael Pollan, who wrote The Omnivore's Dilemma. Eric Schlosser wrote Fast Food Nation. Several other people wrote several other books around the same time that created this exploding interest in Americans in, caring and interest in the restaurant industry and in food. And suddenly, consumers were asking every time they eat out, is this locally sourced? Is this organic? Is this free-range chicken? And the industry was responding. We had been organizing for 10 years in the restaurant industry, making some change, yes, but not reaching not making the kind of change we saw in one moment, through these cultural tools, these books and movies that suddenly got people across America who hadn't thought about it at all, suddenly asking every time they ate out, is this locally sourced, is this organic? There was even some of you may have seen the show Portlandia. Have you guys ever seen the Portland? I'm sure many of you have seen that sketch that I always talk about where they ask about the chicken. Is this local? Is this locally sourced? Is it organic? What was the name of the chicken? And they, the server brings over a photograph of the chicken. Did it have friends? Did it put its little wing around its buddies? What farm was it from? They actually get up from the table and go visit the farm that the chicken is from. It's silly and it's a little obnoxious, but actually that's our dream. That would be our dream. Imagine if people asked like that, do your workers have paid sick days? Do your workers get paid as little as $2.13? Do you have free-range people and not just free-range chicken? Imagine the impact that would have on the restaurant industry. And so realizing that there was this Michael Pollan moment, that we could use that same power to let people know, look, your health is not just affected by how free range your chicken was and whether they had buddies, but it's also impacted by whether your server is sneezing on your food, and whether the person in the kitchen is homeless, and whether the people their wages are being stolen and so they're unhappy and not able to work as well as they could, right? It's affected by all of those things because we are, as was said, interdependent. Our health and our welfare is impacted by the people who we don't even maybe see, who are behind the kitchen door touching our food. So realizing that they could have their Michael Pollan moment, we thought we could have ours too. We had been going around the country talking about the Accidental American, and people kept saying, well, I'm a consumer, what can I do? So we created a diner's guide to let people know the minimum wage and paid sick days practices of the 150 most popular restaurants in America and that of our high road employers. We created these little tip cards to let people, every time they eat up, go up to the manager and say, you know what, I had a great meal, but I see you don't provide paid sick days, and as a consumer, that's really important to me. So we started engaging every single lay person around the country in this way. And as we started thinking about, wow, consumers, so much power in consumers, we started to think about this could grow bigger and bigger and bigger. So I decided to write a book. Eric Schlosser has written the foreword. It's coming out 2/13/2013. It's called Behind the Kitchen Door. We made a video trailer out of one of our members, actually a leader, a restaurant worker, made a beautiful video trailer for the book that's received more than 100,000 hits on YouTube. And Danny Glover's movie company decided to make a full-length fiction feature film out of the Accidental American and a series of short movie portraits based on the profiles of workers in my book. And so it's, we see now this ability to have a book and a movie and short films reach a wider and wider and wider audience of people who eat out, every single person. And the lesson for us has been, you know what? It's not just that our own members can be donors, it's that any donor could actually be a member also, right? It's that anybody out there could become a consumer member of Rock. Anybody out there who eats out, it's like thinking about the widest possible, stretch of people who are affected by our work, that they could provide resources to the organization, and most importantly, like I said, they could help us win. They could help us win, because it's gonna take a groundswell to win in Congress, and we just saw it because the bill that we created that would raise that tip minimum wage from $2.13 to at least $5, George Miller, who is House leadership and is from here, just introduced a bill with Senator Harkin that for the first time in 15 years includes a raise to the tip minimum wage. The first time that we've seen congressional leadership in 15 years, it's introduced legislation that would raise that ridiculously low tip minimum wage. So we haven't won it yet, but it's a huge milestone, and we see it because we're reaching a wider and wider and wider group of people. So the greatest lesson for us is that if we, at least for rock, I'll just speak from our experience, but you know, a lot of times, we did this for a long time, we as progressive movements, we end up speaking to ourselves, right? We end up at conferences, I don't mean to at all downplay this, this is a really important conference, but we end up speaking to ourselves. We end up, you know, putting out reports that our allies read. We end up, you know, doing things that speak to one another rather than trying to think about how do we reach not just our own people, the 10 million restaurant workers or people of color even, but the widest possible audience that we possibly can that's touched by our issues, because everybody is touched by every one of our issues. Everybody eats out or has had family who works in the restaurant industry. Everybody's impacted by environmental issues. Everybody's impacted by the prison industrial complex. Everybody's impacted by all of the issues we care about. And so there is a way, we just have to find it creatively to reach every single person. And for me, at this moment, there's never been a better moment to do that, because of Occupy. It showed us that, you know, you can reach a very, very wide audience of people. There's never been a better moment than now to think about how can we reach the widest possible group of hearts and minds, and think about those people not just as donors, but as partners to help us ultimately win. Thank you.